Hey guys, I'm the Drink Pro. Today I'm sampling Willett Family Estate 7-Year Bourbon. What's up everybody, Drink Pro here. Thanks for joining me. Keep liking, subscribing, sharing this video with your friends. If you really like what I'm doing, I got more content on the Patreon. It's Wonderful Sample Sunday today because I've got the Willett Family Estate 7-Year Bourbon here with me. Now, Willett is a very popular product among bourbon drinkers, and it's been getting some backlash lately because there's a story behind the Willett-sourced whiskeys. The Willett Family Estate products have historically been sourced whiskey from various undisclosed distilleries that were just fantastic pours. They're some of the rarest pours in the world at this point. I won't give any examples here, but I know I'll put a list in the description that explains all of the different Willett products that are out there. There's a huge list that you can find online. It won't be totally all-inclusive, but there are lots of different names that you'll hear that are nicknames, private barrel selections that are out there. Willett built its name on the back of these barrel selections. Like so many distilleries that start with sourced whiskey, Willett has now moved to their own product, mostly. My understanding is that this 7-Year Bourbon is actually being made by Willett and not a sourced whiskey from somewhere else. That can be controversial, particularly because it's being done under the same label. The Willett Family Estate label has historically been only these sourced picks, and some of them have been quite amazing. So this 7-Year Bourbon, which is $100 plus as a bottle, is catching $400 or more on the secondary market. And that kind of pissed some people off, not just because of the huge markup, which is actually relatively common in bourbon, but because of how it makes customers behave. This is barrel 2778. It was released at 132 proof. It was a local release here in Indiana. A lot of people that got their hands on this whiskey immediately put it online and tried to sell it for a markup, 3 to 4 times what they paid for it. And that really pissed a lot of people off, understandably, in the bourbon community. I'm a part of several Facebook groups that are very heavily involved in discussing bourbons and tasting bourbons and talking about the whiskey culture. There were some people that were really unhappy with these flippers trying to make a quick buck on the whiskey. And there's debate about the nature of flipping and about the secondary market. So it really kind of re-stirred the pot on, is it okay to flip whiskey? Is there a grace period where you have to wait before you try to sell a whiskey you bought? Should you give discounts for locals? There's a lot of questions in the whiskey world that bourbon heads get very focused on. And I think it's worth thinking about if bourbon is really important to you. If it's really your life, it's worth figuring out how you feel about these things. But I don't think it's worth losing friendships. I don't think it's worth, abandoning people that you care about or that give you good information. Don't let something like whiskey tear you apart. It's supposed to bring you together. And I stand firmly in the position that you can do with the whiskey what you want, and I might not like it. I might even say I don't like it, but I'm not going to stop you from using the product as you see fit. That's up to the distributors, that's up to the liquor stores, that's up to the distillers to figure out how to move the product. We as consumers just have to do with what we can in the marketplace. And making good friends is a great way to get a sample of this bourbon, which is how I got it. I did not get down to the liquor store in time to buy a bottle of this, unfortunately. So as I said before, this is barrel 2778 at 132 proof. That's 66% alcohol for those playing at home. Quite strong. I tend to like stronger whiskey, so that's something that I find to be a positive. But it really depends who you ask. It's also worth noting for people who don't have any experience with Willett that this is a single barrel product. That means that only one barrel went into this bottle, that went into this glass, and at 66% it was at barrel proof. So you're essentially literally pulling whiskey out of the barrel, putting it into the glass and drinking it. That's a really fun way to drink whiskey. I really like when they do that. Some people find it too powerful and too much and need to add ice or water. And I don't shame people for that at all. If you need to add water or ice to this, go for it. In fact, I will be adding water a little bit later because I believe it can help open up some whiskeys, and some whiskeys it only acts to their detriment. So without further ado, let's give this one a smell. Whoa, okay, the smell on this is wonderful. It's a soft vanilla. Lots of baking spice, lots of corn. There's actually like a mild sourness to this that I like. It's very subtle. I'm actually getting like an orange note. You can really smell the alcohol on this, but it does not smell like a 66% alcohol whiskey. I have a couple that are 70 and 70 plus, but that's very uncommon. 66 is very high up there. And the other 66% alcohol whiskey that I've tried that comes to mind immediately is the Jack Daniel's Single Barrel Proof. That's floating around 67. And it's something that takes a minute before I can even smell it. So the fact that I could pour this out, immediately nose it, and this bottle was only opened a few days ago, tells me this is going to be an incredibly smooth bottle, I hope. But it just smells beautiful. This is a beautiful presentation. I get like a fresh vanilla blossom on the nose. Like I said, those fruits are showing up. I'm getting some berry notes. I'm getting like a blackberry note, but it's very subtle, very soft. The vanilla bean is complemented by this wonderful honey note that kind of opens up with time, like a honeysuckle maybe, but no, it's more honey. The floral note is subtle and it's with the vanilla, and the honey is sort of separate. It's very sweet on the nose, though. I think I would call that a molasses sweetness if I had to guess. But boy, it's getting hotter because I'm shoving my nose down in it because I like the smell so much. Now, it's got a roundedness to it as well. I could see someone calling that chocolate. I could see someone calling that creamy. To me, it's a vanilla ice cream kind of creaminess, roundedness. It's not a chocolate roundedness. The rye, there's a subtle rye spice and a subtle grain note that definitely is present as well, and that subtle floral vanilla bean along with the honey background and the molasses background. There's a lot going on in the nose, but it's very good. Very classic bourbon notes in the best way possible. They're complicated, but they're traditional. It's a wonderful nose on a whiskey to have, to know you're drinking a bourbon unequivocally, not something trying to be something different, not something exploring the space, but doing a really freaking good job of being a bourbon. That's what I'm getting on the nose of this. All right, so let's give this bad boy a taste. Wow. Right off the bat, very grain forward. Almost a cereal note, still very sweet. It definitely has that sweet malty cereal quality with the corn sweetness next to it. And then you get this woodiness in the mid palate, this real strong fresh oak flavor. And then as it kind of falls away in the end of the palate, it's replaced by this, I guess like an herbal bitterness, which is really wonderful. Usually I get the bitterness from the wood, but this bitterness is in a very different place. I'm really liking it. The nose before and after tasting isn't that different, but I actually kind of like that. It's a very consistent profile they've got with this whiskey. I think after tasting it, and then going back on the nose, I might get a hint of a berry quality. Maybe like a blackberry, maybe like a raspberry, but it's very, very, very subtle on the nose, and I don't get it at all on the taste. Perhaps a cherry there as well, or an apricot. There's a couple of fruit notes that show up later on after tasting it. Yeah, that herbal mintiness that I was getting at the finish is now starting to show up earlier and earlier in the palate. It's a very sharp grain spice. I mean, 66%, you're gonna know it's hot, but it's still not as hot as I would expect a 66% to drink. Right off the bat, as soon as I drank this, I could enjoy it and sip it. I was getting the grain notes and the sweetness, and then it moves into the oaky spice, but it never really offended the sensibilities, even though it's incredibly high proof. I think some of that bitterness in the mid palate is showing up as like a chocolate bitterness. It's very, very subtle chocolate, but it's more like a cacao bitterness than it is a barrel tannin bitterness. The woody note in the mid palate is really a fresh oak flavor. And then as it dissipates and as you get to the finish, it starts to become this warm, interesting bitter, almost like a bitter nut quality. It's really extraordinary how much this keeps changing on me. You know, I don't really think it's changing as much as I initially thought. I'm just opening up and finding new notes each time I taste it, because I'm still getting pretty consistently, the initial taste is this very grain forward, sweet corn and malt grain, almost a cereal note, and it quickly dissipates and becomes this rich, fresh oak flavor, and then that goes away. I get a little bit of pepper, I get a little bit of mince and some herbal spice there. And then that kind of goes away, and I'm getting into the more of the barrel tannins now at the finish. It kind of lingers with you. Yeah, this is not going to be a fruity whiskey. This is a lot more grain-centric, a lot more wood-centric and herbal. You definitely get the sweetness and vanilla and maybe a hint of caramel up front, but the majority of what you're tasting is a sweet grain. If you like the crisp, rich flavors of sweet grains and wood, and you like all that brightness, this is a perfect pour for you. And I know some people really like that and some people don't care for it as much, but this really highlights those notes. Now, typically, people get mad when you add water to fancy pours or well sought after, high sought after pours. I don't give a shit. I'm gonna add water to this and see what happens. I'm gonna add quite a bit of water because 66%, I wanna see what happens when we proof it down a significant amount. So the sweetness on the nose opens up. It was a very narrow, sharp grain sweetness. Now it's becoming a lot wider and broader. I'm actually getting a little toffee as well. The herbal notes kind of spread out a little bit on the nose too. The mint is still there, but I'm also getting some of these baking spices that I felt like were kind of hiding behind the herbal notes. It's really opening up when I add some water to it, which is fantastic. I love seeing that. The grain is still really present, but the sweetness is much less. The sweetness comes in the mid palate and opens up. There's this barrel note that's still present. It's still very herbal, but I'm getting a lot of different kinds of herbs, a lot of different kinds of spices. The cinnamon comes out to play a little, the pepper comes out. I think I'm also getting a little cocoa in there, which is not something I was picking up before, really. The finish gets longer when you add water to it, which I didn't expect either. It instead of having this lingering burn throughout, you start to get this alternation between a woodiness and a sweetness and an herbalness, back to the woodiness, back to some pepper in there in the end. I mean, this thing really lingers now. It really stays with you. I could sit there and kind of just smack my lips and enjoy it for at least a full minute. I will say, if I was going to buy a bottle of this, I would probably drink it by adding a little water to it. That might be controversial, but at 66%, a lot of people can't handle that proof. And for my personal palate, I tend to like higher proof stuff, but this opens up so beautifully with water. All the flavors become longer. Other things are hidden underneath them that I can start to pull out. It becomes a much broader taste, and I really enjoy what I'm finding. Would I pay $100 for this bottle? Probably. It's very good. It's got a wonderful little pockets of flavor, and they're all sort of separate. It doesn't give you this symphony until you add a little water to it, where you really round out all the flavors and everything kind of meshes together a little bit. It really takes you on a journey. Each flavor shows up at different points during the tasting, and it really travels throughout. It's a long journey it takes you on. That's what people are looking for typically with higher dollar amount bottles. They want a lot of change, a lot of variation. They want a very good whiskey, and this checks all those boxes. Now, would I pay $400 for this? No way. It's not quite reaching into that level, into the stratosphere of fantastic, unbelievable whiskeys. I think a lot of that is being built off the prestige, quite frankly, of the history of the label. But this is a very, very good whiskey, and I honestly believe it's worth $100. Now, part of that might be because I do think I would add water to it. I would probably dilute it a little bit when I drank it, so the bottle would last longer for me. I could stretch it out. Well, guys, I killed my sample bottle. It was too good to keep around, and I kind of figured as much. Like I said, though, I would definitely pay $100 for this. If I saw this on the shelf, I would pick it up. You should too. It's really hard to find. It does not stay on the shelves long, so if you see it, absolutely pick it up. I'm going to keep drinking like a professional, even though I'm out of whiskey, but I hope you all will too. And I don't know if you can see all of this, but I hope you'll consider, if you're in the Indiana area, working with the Naptown Bourbon Club. The Naptown Bourbon Club just brought me on to do some tastings with whiskeys. I really think it's a good organization, guys. It's a 501c3. They're doing charity work. The upcoming event is going to give money to kids with cancer, creating care packages for them while they're in the hospital, and so they don't feel so lonely and bored, which can be a real problem. I mean, it's a scary time for these people, so anything you can do to help them, feel a little bit better is really valuable. And the Naptown Bourbon Club is helping work with those organizations. I have a lot of friends who are skeptical about the Naptown Bourbon Club. They think maybe there's just an organization trying to find ways to get their own barrel picks and trying to, take money from people and they're not giving any value. I know for a fact that's not true. I've been to 2 of their events. The first event, they gave away several whiskeys for free and did a right to buy on an Old Forester birthday bourbon. The second event, again, they gave away several whiskeys for free. At the end of the event, they did a right to buy an Old Rip Van Winkle 10-year. So these guys are really out there. They're pushing product. They're pushing the community of bourbon. And I think that's really important. And I'm talking about it on this episode because there was such divisiveness about this particular product. People got really hot under the collar about flipping and about the secondary market and about what it means to be a part of a bourbon community. If you're in a local group, do you try to sell stuff at secondary market prices or do you sell it at friend discounts? Depending on how well you know people, that might change your opinion. But people like the Naptown Bourbon Club are, in my opinion, doing it right. They're trying to bring people together. They're trying to create a community of whiskey drinkers. That's always been my mission as well, so I'm happy to work with them. I hope you'll consider joining, guys. Thanks, everybody. Keep drinking like professionals. Cheers.